Hello again. Because he's aware that there is anger and dissatisfaction about the number of illegal immigrants being put up in hotels, the Prime Minister has hit upon a brilliant idea. Suppose we move them from the hotels and instead commandeer old RAF bases to house them. Of course, lacking the same patriotism towards Britain that many of us who have fathers, uncles and grandfathers who fought in the Second World War feel, Rishi Sunak can see no reason not to house these people in, for example, RAF Scrampton in Lincolnshire, former base of the Dambusters, or RAF Wethersfield in Essex, where the families of serving members of the British Army are being evicted to make way for illegal immigrants. Yes, you did hear that right. The families of men of the 33rd Engineer Regiment are to be chucked out of RAF Wethersfield, where they're currently living, so that a bunch of illegal immigrants can be housed at the former Second World War RAF base instead. In the description to this video, I give links about all this. Today, Robert Jenrick, the Minister of State for Immigration, announces that those RAF bases, vital to our defence in the Second World War, are to be turned into accommodation for thousands of immigrants who crossed the Channel illegally. I'm sure we all know that in a bid to make himself popular in the run-up to the local elections in May, Rishi Sunak announced tough measures to tackle illegal immigration. One of those promises was to stop spending millions of pounds a day on hotels to house 50,000 asylum seekers. I've spoken before on this channel of the problems which those hotels full of young foreigners have caused in towns all over the country. The solution which has been hit upon is brilliant. Keeping them in hotels is very unpopular and likely to cause friction in local communities. Why not move them into the middle of nowhere, where there are no local communities, and then they won't generate any negative publicity for the government? The fact that a museum dedicated to the history of RAF Wethersfield has had to be closed down and chucked off the base to make way for these characters is nothing to those making these plans. Of course, RAF Manston in Kent has been used for this purpose for some years now. Would anybody in government with any respect for this country's past, or the slightest awareness of how important the Battle of Britain was to this country, ever have thought of seizing those RAF bases and filling them up with rootless foreigners who have entered the country illegally? Of course not. This is what we get, though, when half the people running Britain are themselves from foreign families with no connections to this country's past. Honestly, what do you think the Dambusters or the Battle of Britain means to Rishi Sunak? The other part of this cunning strategy to hide the asylum seekers is to put them on disused ferries in harbours which are some way from the nearest town. It is hoped that just like those put into old airfields in remote parts of the Lincolnshire and Essex countryside, this will mean that not having any neighbours, there will not be any bad publicity, such as pickets of residents with placards complaining about rapes and that kind of thing. Of course, none of this tinkering about, shuffling thousands of people around from hotels to military bases to old boats, is really dealing with the problem. The main objection which many people have to these many thousands of young men is not what sort of accommodation they are given, it is rather their very presence in this country. We never used to put up with illegal immigration, and until a few years ago had a firm control over our borders. What most of us want is for Britain once again to take control of its frontiers and regulate who comes into the country. Hiding people in the Essex countryside is not really a long-term strategy, I'm afraid, although I suppose it might do the Conservatives some good at the elections in May. The real question is, when are we going to get a grip on immigration and bring it down?